On behalf of the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Administration for Community Living, and the Indian Health Service, I would like to welcome everyone to the Long-Term Services and Support webinar series. My name is Amanda Ree Fox, and I work for Kaufman & Associates. I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is Home and Community-Based Services 1915C Waivers. Before we begin, I would like to highlight the main features of your webinar interface. First is the main window where you see the PowerPoint slides. To the bottom right of the window is the Q&A pod. You can enter a question for presenters at any time in the Q&A pod. A Q&A session will take place after the presentation. If you need technical assistance during the webinar, please enter your tech support question in the Q&A pod. Our tech support staff will be monitoring these questions throughout the webinar and will work to answer your tech support questions right away. You'll receive an answer in the Q&A pod. Finally, please be aware that today's webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be made available online in the near future on cms.gov. With those announcements made, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Please note this webinar series is supported by a contract awarded by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Department of Health and Human Services or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We have two presenters with us today. I would like to introduce you to Catherine Poisel and Linnell Sanderson. Ms. Poisel is a Technical Director of the Division of Long-Term Services and Supports, and Ms. Sanderson is a Health Insurance Specialist for the Division of Long-Term Services and Supports. Both presenters represent the Division of Elderly Health Program Group, Centers for Medicaid and CHIP Services, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Thank you all for joining us today. I will now turn it over to Ms. Poisel to offer an introduction to today's topic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Poisel, and today I'm going to be providing you with an overview of the Medicaid 1915C Waiver Authority that states may use to provide home and community-based services and supports. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope this information will be useful to you. So first, we like to begin with having a basic discussion about where the 1915C Waiver Program fits within the Medicaid programs. I start off by telling you that there are a number of Medicaid authorities that include home and community-based services, or HCBS for short. All of these numbers here represent sections of the Social Security Act. 1905A is the Medicaid State Plan. 1915C is the Medicaid Home and Community-Based Services Waivers, or HCBS, in which I'm going to speak with you about today. There's also 1915I, which is State Plan HCBS within the Medicaid State Plan. So it's HCBS right within the Medicaid State Plan, and that's another authority that states may utilize to add HCBS. Self-directed personal assistance services State Plan option is under 1915J. 1915K affords states the option to add a community first choice services. There are also Medicaid managed care authorities that include HCBS, including the 1915B waivers. And then there's 1115 demonstration waivers that may include some HCBS. We have a couple of states who actually have all of their 1915C type services contained within 1115 demonstration waivers. So first off, just to give a basic background on Medicaid in general, it's important to know that states determine their own unique programs. Every state develops and operates a Medicaid state plan, and that state plan outlines the nature and the scope of the services each state provides. The state plan and any amendments to that state plan must be approved by CMS. Within the state plan, Medicaid mandates some services. So every state that participates in Medicaid must have a state plan, and within that plan, there are some services that are mandatory for every state to provide. But there's also a lot of optional services that states may provide that ends up showing variability from state to state in the types of services that may be offered. States also get to have options regarding eligibility groups who may be covered under the Medicaid program in their state, as well as the payment methodologies for each of the services and the minimum provider qualifications for each of the services. So this is to give you a sense that there are the Medicaid state plans among the various states can look very different from each other. Besides the mandatory services, there can be a great deal of differences from state to state in the types of optional services that the states offer, as well as the eligibility groups that are covered and the provider qualifications. In general, states must follow the rules in the Social Security Act, the Code of Federal Regulations, generally 42 CFR, the State Medicaid Manual, and other policies that are issued by CMS. Each state plan must include the services that a state wishes to cover and the amount, duration, and scope of every covered service. States are not permitted to place limits on services or deny and/or reduce coverage due to a particular illness or condition. All services that are included in a state plan must be medically necessary in order for participants to receive them. There are also requirements for children up to age 21 called Early and Periodic Screening Diagnostic Treatment, or EPSDT for short. There are also third-party liability rules which require Medicaid to be the payer of last resort. Generally, all state plan Medicaid services must be available statewide. Every Medicaid beneficiary must have free choice of the providers that meet the minimum provider qualifications that a state establishes for each service. And states can enroll all willing and qualified providers, and they also can establish the payment for those services. Those reimbursement methodologies must include methods and procedures to ensure that the payments are consistent with the economy, efficiency, and quality of care principles. So here on this slide, you see that there are the mandatory services I mentioned earlier that every state must offer in their in their state plan, not 1915. So every state must offer all of these services on the left. On the right is a list of optional services. Some states might include some of these, but not every state will include the same services. Among the services that I just listed, there's some that are actually HCBS. So the HCBS that's available through the state plan includes some basic state plan or 1905A type services under the home health benefit. The mandatory services under the home health benefit that all states must cover include skilled nursing, home health aid, medical supplies and equipment and appliances. And there's also some optional services that states can include under the state plan home health benefit, including physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and audiology therapies. Under the state plan 1905A, personal care services are also an option for states, and that's HCBS. And that can include a self-directed option as well. Rehabilitative services is another 1905A type service that can be included under a state's Medicaid state plan. And then optional are state plan HCBS 1915I. That's not part of the regular state plan, but they are still considered state plan services that a state may choose to offer under its state plan. 1915I has a lot of similarity to 1915C waivers, but a big difference between the two is that states are able to provide the services to people who are not otherwise eligible under the 1915C waiver program. The 1915C waiver program requires individuals to meet an institutional level of care, and the 1915I benefit under the state plan does not. And finally, another state plan service category in which states can offer HCBS is the 1915K Community First Choice option. So all of that was about the Medicaid state plan. So states are permitted to waive certain provisions required through the regular state plan process. All of those requirements that I mentioned a few slides ago, some of those can be waived under Medicaid, and then that's when you get a waiver. That's how you get a waiver. I'm going to talk today one of those types of waivers, the 1915C waiver. Under 1915C, the provisions that can be waived are related to comparability, which is amount, duration, and scope. This is the provision that allows states to target the populations under 1915C waivers and allows them to provide the services to specific groups of individuals differently than they would provide the services to everyone else in the Medicaid population. So basically carving out a portion of the Medicaid population and allowing them to receive additional services on top of what they get under the state plan. States are also permitted to waive statewide-ness and income and resource requirements under 1915C waivers. 1915C HCBS waiver services are designed to complement and or supplement the services that are available through the Medicaid state plan. Everyone who participates in a 1915C waiver is also eligible to receive the services under their state's Medicaid state plan. They are Medicaid eligible. They also complement the services that are offered through other federal, state, and local public programs, as well as supports from families and communities. The 1915C waiver program is a major tool for meeting the demand for long-term services and supports. It permits states to provide HCBS to people who would otherwise require an institutional level of care, a nursing facility, an intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual disabilities, or a hospital. The 1915C waiver program serves a diverse range of target groups. Those target groups include individuals with physical disabilities, individuals who are elderly, individuals with intellectual disabilities, individuals with mental illness, and also subgroups of those populations, such as individuals with autism, individuals with traumatic brain injury, just for example. Any or all of the services that states choose to offer in a 1915C waiver can be self-directed at the option of the state Medicaid agency. So some basic waiver facts. There are approximately 262 1915C waivers in operation across the country at this time, and they serve more than 1 million individuals. 1915C waivers remain to be the primary vehicle used by states to offer non-institutional services to individuals with significant disabilities. The waivers are designed as an alternative to institutional care to support community living and integration, and they really are a powerful tool in the state's effort to increase community services. On this slide, you see the services that states are permitted to include under a 1915C waiver. They don't have to include all of them. They can choose which services that will best meet the needs of the population that they're serving in a particular waiver. Those services include home health aid, personal care, case management, adult day health, habilitation, homemaker, respite care, and for persons with chronic mental illness, day treatment or partial hospitalization, psychosocial rehabilitation, and clinic services. And then there are also other services that states may choose to offer under their 1915C waivers. For those services, they provide the title, the service definitions, and everything that they would need to specify for those particular services. But there's a great deal of flexibility for states to decide which services their populations need. Some examples of some popular services that are in the other category that we frequently see in 1915C waivers are extended state plan services. Those are services that really extend what states are currently offering under the Medicaid state plan. So remember that there can be limits placed to those services based on amount, duration, and scope. So those amount, duration, and scope limits that are under the state plan, states may choose to extend those for particular populations within their 1915C waivers and calling them extended state plan services. For example, extended state plan personal care services may offer an individual an extended time frame to receive more personal care than is generally afforded the rest of the Medicaid population. Other service examples include home modifications, non-medical transportation, assistive technology, and supports for participant direction for waivers that include participant direction. And those are just some examples. We have a lot of other services that states have chosen to offer in their 1915C waivers. So there are some specific requirements that state Medicaid agencies have to demonstrate and meet in their 1915C HCBS waiver applications. HCBS must be cost neutral as compared to institutional services, and this is on average for the individuals enrolled in the waiver. So on average, the cost for the service under a 1915C waiver must be equal to or less than the cost for, on average, for those same individuals in an institution. In addition, another requirement is that individuals must be Medicaid eligible. They must meet an institutional level of care, and they have to also be in the target population that's chosen and defined by the state. Other requirements are assessment and plan of care. Services must be provided in accordance with an individualized assessment as well as a person-centered service plan. The person or agency responsible for completing the individualized assessment and the person-centered service plan is not permitted to be a provider because that would be a conflict of interest. However, an exception can be requested by the state Medicaid agency if they demonstrate in their waiver application that the only willing and qualified entity in a geographic area who can perform these functions also provides HCBS. Only willing and qualified could include considerations such as tribal cultural competence, language needs, and lack of providers in a rural location. For this exception permitted under the regulation, the state Medicaid agency would have to devise conflict of interest protections, including separation of entity and provider functions within provider entities, among other protections. These protections must first be approved by CMS in the waiver application. And the last item in the slide is regarding free choice of providers. This is not a specific requirement in 1915C. This is a general Medicaid requirement. But we like to note here, it's important to note, that this is not waived under 1915C. HCBS participants must have the choice of all willing and qualified providers, meaning that they meet the provider qualifications that the state has established for each service. Unless the state operates the 1915C waiver with a concurrent managed care authority that waives this free choice of provider requirement, states must afford choice of all willing and qualified providers to every participant. And I will talk more about managed care further in this presentation. Another 1915C requirement is the home and community-based settings criteria. This set of criteria was developed to ensure full access to benefits of community living and the opportunity to receive services in the most integrated setting. The home and community-based settings requirements were established in 2014 in a rule published that same year. And I will mention the rule later on in this presentation, but I wanted to emphasize that this is an area that CMS and states have been spending a lot of time on and ensuring that the benefits of community living and the opportunity to receive those services in the most integrated setting is afforded to all waiver participants. And the last requirement I want to mention here is quality. Every 1915C waiver must include a quality improvement strategy. That quality improvement strategy is an evidence-based continuous quality improvement process. It must include measures of program performance, and states have to demonstrate compliance with the Waiver Statutory Assurances through this quality improvement strategy, or QIS. The federal statutory assurances include level of care, meaning every participant must meet an institutional level of care. Service plans, that all the services that waiver participants receive are driven by a service plan that is person-centered, and there are specific requirements in 1915C regulations regarding person-centered planning. Qualified providers. Every provider must meet the minimum provider qualifications that a state establishes for the service. Health and welfare. This is how the state will monitor with an effective system to ensure waiver participants' health and welfare. Administrative authority is how the Medicaid state agency will retain ultimate administrative responsibility for the operation of the waiver program by exercising oversight of the performance of waiver functions by other agencies as well as contracted entities. Financial accountability are the methods that the state will employ to ensure that the integrity of payments made for waiver services are intact. So these are the federal assurances that states must demonstrate how they will comport with, how they will monitor and ensure the compliance with in their quality improvement strategy or QIS. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about 1915C waiver processing. When a state requests a new waiver with CMS, they submit a waiver application. CMS reviews it, and when it's approvable, approves it for a period of 3 years. States could also request a period of 5 years instead of 3 years if the waiver serves persons who are dually eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. Once the waiver is approved, at any time, states may request amendments to their waiver. At the end of the waiver period, that initial period, whether it's 3 or 5 years, states may request that the waivers be renewed. They submit a waiver application for this. In reviewing this waiver application, CMS considers whether the state has met the statutory and regulatory assurances and then moves it to approval once it's ready. These renewals are then granted for a period of 5 years. So I mentioned earlier that the 1915C waiver can operate with a concurrent managed care authority. Well, HCBS under 1915C is usually provided as fee-for-service. The service is delivered, a claim is filed, and payment is made. But the HCBS can also be provided as part of a managed care delivery system using a concurrent Medicaid managed care authority such as a 1915B waiver. HCBS that is delivered with a managed care authority will allow states to design and implement programs with a continuum of design features. It might just include a limitation of the providers, but it also could be a fully capitated managed care arrangement that allows for risk sharing between the state and the managed care entities. There are some additional consideration with regards to managed care and American Indians and Alaska Natives under Section 5006 of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. There is more information about that subject on the cms.gov website. In order to operate HCBS with a concurrent managed care authority, a state must first complete and submit a separate application for each authority. So if they want a 1915C waiver to operate with a concurrent 1915B managed care waiver, that state would submit a 1915C waiver application and a 1915B application. Each application has different requirements, as each waiver authority is governed by distinct provisions of the Social Security Act and is subject to different federal regulations. CMS reviews each application for its independent compliance with the various statutory and regulatory requirements, but we do so with consideration of the fact that it will operate under a concurrent authority with both programs. In 2014, CMS amended and added to the regulations for 1915C waivers. Those regulations became effective on March 17, 2014. Earlier I mentioned one significant piece of those regulations, which is the establishment of the 1915C home and community-based settings requirements. It also added person-centered service planning, some rules regarding public input, and other areas in addition to those. It was a very important regulation, and I would encourage you to read more about it if you're interested at the website listed here on this slide. So the 1915C waiver applications are web-based. Currently, the version is 3.6, and these waivers are housed in a waiver management system. When states wish to pursue a 1915C waiver action, either a new waiver, an amendment, or a renewal, they submit through using this waiver management system. The waiver application also has a robust set of accompanying instructions and guidance. This is called the Instructions Technical Guide and Review Criteria for the HCBS waiver. Both of these documents are available at the website listed here, as well as other information that's important to 1915C. I would encourage you to take a look if you're interested in learning more. That concludes this portion of the presentation. My name again is Kathy Poisel. My colleague Linnell Sanderson is also on the line. And now I would like to turn it back over to Amanda Reed for the question and answer portion of the presentation. Thank you.
This is our time for questions. Please enter your questions in the Q&A pod located at the bottom right side of your screen. Since we have no questions, I would like to thank our presenters for joining us today and sharing information about home and community-based services 1915C waivers. In closing, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded and that the audio and presentation slides were made available online at cms.gov on the CMS Tribal LTSS Technical Assistance Center website. I'm sorry, let me run back. We do have one question. Is CMS planning to add language to these types of presentations that outline aspects specific to tribes or state working with tribes? Kathy?
Yeah, so we're considering the question. I don't think we have any specific plans to do so at this time. If there is specific information that you are seeking, I mentioned some things throughout the presentation. If there's something specific that you'd like to learn more about, please let us know what that is, and we'll be sure to get that information to you.
Okay, thank you.
I think I would like to point out here that I really appreciate everyone's time and attention in learning about this topic. We're very excited to talk with you today about this. If you would like to find out more about what 1915C waivers exist or pursue even new options within your state, I would encourage you to reach out to your state Medicaid agency. They are the ones who would submit the waiver applications to CMS and responsible for the administrative functions. So I would greatly suggest that you do that. If you have general questions or seeking information about what is permissible from a federal standpoint underneath these 1915C waivers, we'd be happy to share any information that you need. Thank you.
Our next question is, what are income guidelines? Kathy?
Sure. So I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. Perhaps you're thinking about the fact that states can waive some income and resource requirements. So there are, every individual, first of all, must be eligible for Medicaid, which means that they fall within one of the Medicaid eligibility groups that states offer underneath their state plan. There are also there's an additional eligibility group that's afforded as an option to states to add to their 1915C waiver. And in that eligibility group, which we call the 217 group, states have the option to allow individuals to become eligible by virtue of being eligible for the 1915C waiver. There are specific income guidelines with that, as well as income guidelines within the particular Medicaid eligibility groups within the straight basic Medicaid state plan. However, I am not the CMS subject matter expert. Neither Linnell or I, the subject matter experts in that area. So if you have specific questions about that, we would get you in touch with those folks within CMS who could best address those questions. And I hope that's helpful. But feel free to reach out to Linnell and I. Our email address is on the last slide if you'd like to have some more information about that, and we'll make sure we get you in touch with those CMS staff.
Thank you, Kathy. Our next question is, does Medicaid cover home health skilled nursing, and is PPOT optional?
So Medicaid home health is a state plan service, not a 1915C waiver service, and that is a required service, but the physical therapy, occupational therapy, and audio and speech, those are all services that are optional for states to include under their mandatory home health benefit. So it would depend on the state.
Great, thank you. Kathy, do you track estimated processing time for people to receive these services?
That's a good question. I don't think we have a straight up answer for you on that today. I can get back to you on that question.
Great.
I don't know if it's something that we track or not, so we'll have to get back to you.
Wonderful. Are 1519C waivers only available to Native American groups?
No. 1915C waivers are available to individuals that states choose a target population. The target population would be broader. It wouldn't be a target population of just individuals who are in a tribe. The target populations can be based on disability such as physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, mental illness. It can include individuals who are elderly, but states get to choose who they're going to cover under a particular waiver, which target group they want to cover. And it's, based on disability or condition that the population possesses. So tribes certainly can be among those, but it wouldn't be exclusive to tribal members.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Kathy, is there any way to shorten the wait list for these waivers? For example, some states have a 7 to 10-year wait list for Medicaid waiver programs.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the features of 1915C that is adding flexibility for states is the ability to cap the number of people that can be served in a 1915C waiver. So the state has to set a hard limit on how many people they will serve. It's their call. They get to choose that number of how many they're going to serve. States usually, there's a lot of consideration that states use to when they're thinking about that number, the budget that they are afforded to serve the population, the needs of the population, making sure that they can meet the needs of who they're going to serve. and that they can offer all the services that they will need within that waiver. Beyond that, CMS does not regulate or have any authority granted to us by Congress to monitor or enforce wait lists for states to keep. So our authority begins once the 1915C waiver program enrollment begins. We do know, however, that states manage their enrollment into the 1915C waivers. We do know some information about that. And some states do so by maintaining a wait list of individuals who are waiting for a spot to open up on a 1915C waiver once they've reached that capacity. There are some waivers that haven't reached that capacity, but there are some waivers, as the commenter mentioned, that actually have wait lists, and some of them are unfortunately wrong. CMS doesn't have any authority, again, over those wait lists or ability to make any changes there. What I would recommend is that you reach out to your state Medicaid agencies and talk to them about your concerns there, and to learn more about how those waiting lists are monitored and moved.
All right, our next question is, are these waivers the same as the DD waiver?
Well, a DD or developmental disability is a type of population that can be served under a 1915C waiver. So it may be, but I'm not sure if it could also be referring to another type of Medicaid authority that includes a population of individuals with developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities.
Okay. Is the 1915 waiver strictly for Medicaid, and is the 1135 only for Medicare?
The 1915C waiver is strictly for individuals who are eligible for Medicaid. The 1135 waiver is a different waiver altogether, and I don't know enough about that to really speak openly. So if you want to send in, if you have specific questions about that authority, I'd be happy to connect you with somebody within CMS who perhaps could give you more information about that.
Wonderful. If a person has a Medicare supplement plan, but not Medicaid, can they be eligible for home health care?
I'm afraid that question reaches beyond the scope of my area with the 1915C waivers, so we can try to find out who the right person would be to answer that question and get a response to you.
Okay. Once someone has a 1915C waiver, does the state have to continue to provide services as long as the need is present?
Yes, as long as an individual meets the eligibility criteria for the waiver, a state has to provide the services to that individual and meet their needs as long as they're able to maintain their health and welfare in the community and they're eligible for the waiver.
Kathy,
now,
is it up to the state?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
My apologies. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that remember that there is a great deal of flexibility for states to make changes within their waiver program. So states might decide that they no longer have the budget to maintain that waiver. These are optional services. So if a state is choosing to participate in the Medicaid program, they must serve the individuals who are enrolled in receiving services in that waiver. But they might decide that they no longer can have that waiver and have to cancel it. That would be an unfortunate thing, and they would have to have a transition plan for those individuals. But just remember that these are optional services for states to include, and they're there as long as the state is able to fund them and has a need for them.
Is it up to the states to decide a CMS requirement once a person enters in SNF, even if intended to be short-term? Or will they lose their benefit and go back up to the back of the line?
I'm reading the question. Hold on one second. Can you repeat the question to me because it's scrolling through faster than I can read it?
Yes, of course. Is it up to the state to decide a CMS requirement once a person enters an SNF, even if intended to be short-term, or will they lose their benefit and go back to the back of the line?
So SNF is a skilled nursing facility. That's an institution, and that's not governed by our 1915C waivers. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Where can we get information regarding respite from caring for patients? Who may need who may really need long-term care? Does Medicare help with respite care?
So respite care, I believe, is what we're referring to here, and respite services are a service that a state might choose to include in a 1915C waiver. It's up to the state as to whether or not they include it, and, you know, they'd have to demonstrate a need for the respite and be eligible for the waiver, of course. I don't know whether Medicare provides respite, but Medicaid under 1915C waivers does offer that if the state Medicaid agency chooses to include it in a 1915C waiver. I hope that helps answer that question.
Thank you. What is the difference between the 1915B and C waiver?
So the 1915B waiver is a Medicaid Managed Care Authority. So that gives states the option to provide Medicaid state plans or waiver services utilizing, managed care. So as I mentioned in one of the slides, it might include, there are different options for states under managed care. So it could include the ability for states to waive requirements under the Medicaid state plan in order to limit providers, the providers of the services. It can also include, and that would be like a smaller thing, but it can also include the ability for states to have a full capitated program, for the services that they're providing. So 1915B waivers can operate alone in conjunction with Medicaid state plan services. But like I mentioned in my slides, they can also operate a 1915B waiver concurrently with a 1915C waiver to do the same type of things and waive additional requirements under Medicaid that they couldn't normally waive under a 1915C waiver alone.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay. Again, I would like to thank our presenters for joining us today and sharing information about Home and Community-Based Services 1915C waivers. In closing, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded and that the audio and presentation slides will be made available online at cms.gov on the CMS Tribal LTSS Technical Assistance Center website. For any information that we are not able to address today or need follow-up, an e-blast will be sent out to our participants with response and additional information. Thank you again for joining today's webinar. Our session is now concluded.